Welcome. Today we are in the trees. Last week we started a conversation about some things to consider if you're interested in starting van life. We left off with this very important question.
Why are you the way that you are?
This one is still very much unanswered. We're gonna move past it for now and focus on overnight parking. Before I moved onto the road, this is the thing that freaked me out the most. Like, leading up to the day my apartment lease expired, I did as much research as I could to figure out where I should stay overnight. My first night on the road was spent parking right outside the apartment building I had just moved out of. I still had the parking permit, so I felt pretty safe and legal staying there. Then I started driving 38 minutes each way toward the mountains every morning and every night just to camp in the forest. It's funny how back then I thought that was such a life hack to be sleeping for free in the forest, and now there's no way I'd drive that far without staying for at least a few days. After about 2 weeks of that, I left for Utah to properly hit the road, and that's when I began to really see what was out there in terms of wild camping. There was a lot of trial and error involved and a lot of mistakes made along the way, but over time I began to develop a pretty good handle on how and where to find safe parking spots. In the past 5 years, I've developed a pretty solid archive of places to stay and what I can expect there, so finding a place to park at night has become mostly a non-issue. So, what makes a solid overnight camping spot? First, check the weather. I've learned the hard way to always check this first before committing to a location. Once you've narrowed down your search to a region, the baseline criteria is a place that is safe, legal, and accessible. Sounds simple, but it's not always easy. Not all roads are created equally, and Google Maps or Map app can be a useful resource in zooming in to see what you're working with. But even that only goes so far, and I've also learned this one the hard way by almost getting stuck at least on 2 separate occasions that I can remember. One time was in waist-deep snow when I was still in my Xterra, and another time, I think it was last year in the desert during a sudden rainstorm. I was driving along and suddenly started sinking, like, drastically on a dirt road, and I had to floor it in reverse in the middle of the night. I couldn't see what was behind me. It was very scary. Do not recommend. Next, I'm looking for a spot that is level and at least somewhat quiet. Head needs to go in one of those corners. And now, okay, head needs to go in that corner. And that's how I work out which way to sleep every night. This is especially relevant in urban areas where you might be dealing with garbage trucks or street sweepers or bus stops. It's more important to have a level spot in the city because you wouldn't want to pull out leveling blocks on a residential street because it's a clear sign that you're sleeping there as opposed to wild camping where you can make hilly terrain work by just driving up onto blocks. Next, I check to see if I have cell service. Or if you have Starlink, then check for a clear connection. And then I'm assessing how far I'll need to drive to refill my water tanks, resupply my food, take a shower, and whether or not there is a post office, UPS, or FedEx where I can receive any necessary shipments for work. Finally, I'm looking for a place with a beautiful view that is either in or near natural landscapes or parks where I can hike and also potentially film and photograph. So, let's start with one of the more expensive but obvious options. Campgrounds. I could count on 2 hands just how many times I paid to sleep in a campground the first 3 years I lived on the road. The way I see it, if you're planning to do this long term, paying for campsites on a regular basis isn't exactly sustainable because those days can really add up. Most campgrounds I've stayed at average about $40 a night, and if you multiply that by 30, that's $1,200. $1,200 for a place just to park. Like, you might as well just get an apartment at that point. Unless, of course, you're doing it purely for the experience, in which case it does make sense because you're able to travel and see beautiful places without paying the even higher price of a hotel or an Airbnb. But the main reason why I don't stay in campgrounds very often is because I find most of them lack the kind of stillness and immersion in nature that I'm actually seeking out here on the road. In my experience, I'm usually tucked in between families with young kids and pets and or RVs with generators and big screen TVs, and hey, that's cool. Like, camping is for everyone. We're all entitled to camp with as much or as little comfort as we crave. But I personally like to hear the sounds of nature and also like to be able to walk around outside maybe in my swimsuit, and take a shower without feeling like I'm in a small town center of sorts. I don't always find what I'm looking for, but I'm not really a fan of paying for something that I don't even want, if that makes sense. Okay, next, truck stops and rest areas. Travel America love truck stops and pilot gas stations. I've probably slept in these about 5% of the time. I personally find them to be really loud with bright lights and generators that run all through the night. Same goes for most rest stops, although I've probably spent more time staying at these just because they're so convenient whenever I'm doing a long haul drive and I need a place to tuck in for the night. I have found that Oregon rest stops are my favorite. Some of them are really quiet gems where I've literally been the only vehicle there and I've sat outside and actually watched the stars at night, which is really nice. But otherwise, I generally prefer a wild camping spot to a rest area if it's an option. The majority of my nights are spent wild camping on BLM, which is the Bureau of Land Management, state lands, and national forest lands. This is a map of our public lands here in the United States. I often get asked why I haven't ventured east with the van, and this is honestly the main reason why. The camping out west is so plentiful and there are way fewer people and more space with less development. As a person who can appreciate my fellow humans but doesn't necessarily want to always see them, the West is really just more my style. These are the places where you'll find the beautiful views and the sweeping landscapes, the quiet solitude of nature. There are really and truly so many gems and places to explore that once you understand how to scout them out, the options are pretty endless. Some downsides to wild camping might include limited or no access to amenities like a shower or the ability to restock essentials like food or gas, water. You might also feel a little more exposed from a safety aspect, depending on your comfort level, disconnected from society, and you're kind of susceptible to wildlife like rodents trying to take up residence in your vehicle or maybe bears roaming through your campsite. Still, it's my favorite option, and if it were no longer possible to wild camp, I would quit van life today, like without question. How do I find these places? When I first started out, I leaned pretty heavily on the app iOverlander and freecampsites.net. And as time went on, I began branching out from those locations to find spots that were less crowded, but in similar landscapes. One really great way to do this is by using the satellite version of Google Maps or Google Earth. I'm sure you all know this already, but just in case you don't, in many locations, you can take that little person icon and plop it down on the map so that you can see an eye-level view of a spot on the map. And that has helped me really understand if there are gates blocking forest roads or other obstacles that might not be visible from above. It isn't foolproof, but it's just an extra tool to help in scouting a new spot. Sometimes, once I've arrived to an area, I'll pop up my drone to search for a campsite before committing to driving down like a really gnarly road. This is pretty helpful, but I would just remind you to be sure droning is legal wherever you happen to do it. Back to the topic of using apps like iOverlander or relying on popular blog posts with geocoordinates. I have mixed emotions about these. It's true that they were really helpful to me as a starting point, but there are quite a few places I can think of that used to be pristine and relatively unknown 5 years ago that are now overrun with campers, littered with trash, and in some cases closed altogether or requiring permits. Sedona, Road 525, used to be a camping haven and is now so overrun that I hear they've actually closed most of it off to camping. Maybe some of you can confirm that. Alabama Hills is another example, and one of my favorite places on Whidbey Island. It was shut down this past summer after locals just got tired of trash being left around. And honestly, I don't blame them. Like, imagine growing up in a place where you were able to enjoy nature with little to no people around, and all of a sudden, the place is just trampled and kind of destroyed and always occupied by strangers. Many of you ask if I could provide a resource with pinpoints of my favorite places to stay, or you might message privately and ask for specific locations. And in some rare situations, I do share. And I know there are a lot of travel influencers and bloggers out there who do provide resources like that. But I personally feel conflicted on this issue. I see both sides. As someone who grew up in a city surrounded by farmland and devoid of mountains, oceans, and forests, I believe everyone should have access to these beautiful places. At the same time, I can't deny that social media and oversharing has had a lot of negative impacts on these places, and I hesitate to contribute any more than I already have. And I realize this is an oversimplification of the issue and its many, many sides, but I personally believe that in most cases, discovering a location for yourself and knowing what to look for is an important part of the process. Putting in the work and research builds confidence and the skills necessary to persist in this kind of lifestyle. It's like that old saying, give a man a fish and he eats for a day, but teach a man to fish and he'll eat for a lifetime. Equally, if not more important, is the need to protect these places by treating them with respect, by picking up trash and just leaving a place better than you found it. We have to each individually want to care for these places, and at least for now, for me, I think that choosing to not share them publicly is one way to do that. I've also chosen not to share for safety reasons. The archive I've built of my favorite campsites are places I return to like again and again. And many of them are seasonal. And if you also follow me on Instagram and do just a tiny amount of research, it wouldn't be that hard to narrow down where I might be spending my nights. And that just isn't a risk that I want to expose myself to. On the topic of safety, even if a place checks all the boxes, if something feels off, trust your gut and move on to the next place. I've done this myself a handful of times, and though I can't tell you exactly why I decided to leave, I know that it was always the right choice. I actually put together a video about this a while back, which I would suggest you check out after this one because safety plays a big role in finding quality overnight campsites. And rather than repeat myself too much here, I'll just say that anything is possible anywhere at any time, and having awareness and being prepared are your two greatest defenses against finding yourself in a compromising situation. That said, living like this is not nearly as scary as it might seem from the outside. On the whole, I tend to feel much safer in wild camping spots than I do in cities, and the two scariest incidents I've personally had on the road were both on the outskirts of large cities. The first one happened during the first few months I hit the road. I was parked on some desert land in Southern California, kind of on the outskirts of LA, and sometime around 3 a.m., I just randomly woke up and looked out the windshield, and there were these headlights in the distance coming just straight toward me. And there hadn't been anyone around me when I fell asleep, so it seemed like rather odd. And then I realized the lights were picking up speed, like quickly, coming straight in my direction. So I leapt into the driver's seat and literally just skirt out of there in the middle of the night. And I have no idea if they had any intention of approaching me. They could have been totally harmless. I just didn't stick around to find out. The second time, I was parked along the ocean in the forest, and I had all of my window covers up, so I couldn't see anything. But for some odd reason, I woke up at 2 a.m. and removed the window cover of my side window just above where I was sleeping, like this, and there were headlights pointed straight at me. I was pretty disoriented at first, but then I realized that a large truck had me T-boned in a huge parking lot, and like no one else was there. Like it was an empty parking lot, and they had me T-boned. And as I was staring at it, just like blinking, it suddenly backed up and just peeled out of the parking lot. I'm guessing they saw my face in the window or something like that. I have also stayed in places where no one physically came around to bother me, but there were clear indications that campers and non-locals were just not wanted. What even is that? Holy shit, this is so gross. Why do people do this? I have been parked in this spot for 4 hours. It's quiet. Only one truck drove by and kind of slowed down when they drove by. But otherwise, there's been no one up here. Since it's getting darker, I'm just realizing that once it's pitch dark here, I'm not so sure I'm going to feel super safe. I'd probably be absolutely fine, but I was reading reviews on iOverlander of a place pretty close to here. They said that at 1 a.m., 3 different trucks were driving by with their brights on and making loud noises, and they felt super sketched out and unsafe. So I just don't want to risk it because there's literally no one else up here as far as I can tell. One person actually said they pulled up to the site and they got locals gonna keep vibes. So I've just decided to keep driving. It's 40 minutes to the coast and I still don't know where I'm going to spend the night. They have a city ordinance against parking there at night, so I might have to get a campground, or the hotels are only like $60. So I've made the executive decision to not risk staying here. Goodbye, campsite. Now, stealth camping versus wild camping. I've already mentioned that I lean really heavily in the direction of wild camping, but I also do stealth camp from time to time. Usually when I'm stuck in a city waiting on a package to arrive, or I have an appointment of some kind, or I'm meeting up with friends. Otherwise, I personally like to stay as far away from the cities as possible. There are quite a lot of van lifers who spend the majority of their time in cities, and they do make it work. So it's definitely possible if that's what you're aiming to do. When I say stealthy, I don't mean camping illegally. I'm referring to finding safe places to park in cities and counties where it's legal to sleep in your car. The laws are really varied when it comes to this, so it's always best to do your own research. In San Luis Obispo, for example, the fine is something like $300 if you're caught sleeping in your vehicle. And in Sedona, if I remember correctly, I saw a sign that said the fine was $5,000, which is just like some of the places I've personally stayed. Walmart, of course, but to be honest, probably only like 20 to 30 times total over the past 5 years, always when I'm in transit. Cracker Barrel like 5 times, and I have stayed on residential streets. In some states and cities, there are ordinances against sleeping overnight in your vehicle, so sleeping at a Walmart or Cracker Barrel isn't always an option. Also, I have to say that things seem to be shifting when it comes to Walmart and their willingness to let us stay there overnight. I don't know. Tell me what you guys have experienced in the comments, but the last one that I stayed at, it was a little over a year ago, and the parking lot had these loud speakers that blared rock music all night long. I low-key got the impression that they didn't want me there. Also, when I look on the iOverlander app, I tend to come across more and more locations that read, "This place marked as closed," including some Walmarts and Cracker Barrels. Honestly, it makes sense that this would happen, especially after so many people hit the road in 2020, and many of these places just saw like a drastic uptick in overnight camping. But it is discouraging to think that rather than this being like a positive thing, in the sense that we're all being respectful and actually supporting the places we stay by loading up on groceries or whatever, there are enough of us out there that are loud, messy, disrespectful, or whatever else you might imagine would inspire business owners to shut us out. It's a bummer, and it sucks, and I hate it. Let's talk about what it means to not be an asshole when you are stealth camping. Number 1, don't overstay your welcome. AKA, don't stay in a spot too often or hang around the night before or morning after. I try to find a handful of potential options and then switch it up every couple of nights by rotating between each spot. Typically, my city-based evenings involve parking at a public park until closing time, where I'll make my bed, brush my teeth, and just do my whole evening routine before driving over to my sleeping spot. That way I can tuck in right when I arrive and then leave first thing in the morning. If you're really doing it right, people living nearby won't even know you were ever there, hence the term stealth. Another tip is to use some form of privacy curtains or window covers. I use magnetic covers from Van Gear. They have Reflectix material sewn into them, so they insulate the windows from both the heat and the cold, and they easily fold up for storage during the day. I also have this privacy blackout curtain that I secure with a magnet, and all of these things combined completely black out my van at night so that nothing is visible from the outside, even if I turn one of the lights on. I have seen vans that use foil-looking covers or actual curtains, and while this is effective at blocking out the light, it might tip someone off that you're sleeping in your vehicle. For this same reason, I always make sure that my front cab is clear of clutter or anything that shouts, "Hey, I live in my car," not only to deter theft, but also just to blend in with other vehicles on the street. I would suggest being mindful about running your fan and or heater all night. That isn't always possible, but it can tip someone off that you're inside. Crack the window so that you can avoid the buildup of condensation. That's a dead giveaway. One more weird tip that may or may not be useful, but I use. I still have my overnight parking permit from my last apartment. There's no date on it. So sometimes I'll throw that up in my rearview mirror along with my National Parks Pass if I think there's a chance of getting a knock. I don't know if that makes any real difference. Probably not. But if I saw a parking pass on someone's dash, I would be more likely to assume that that person does have a home and they're probably just visiting a friend and street parking for the night. When parking in a residential area, I'm usually scrolling around Google Maps looking for a large park of some kind and whether or not there's parking anywhere along the park boundaries so that I'm not parking directly in front of someone's house. Another option is to look for corner spaces where there's a lot of visible greenery, like trees or shrubs, or also a sparsely populated industrial area. Just someplace where I'm not inconveniencing anyone, I'm out of the way, and I can more or less be invisible, tuck in, tuck out. When I was living in my SUV, my biggest personal issue with stealth camping was the fact that I couldn't use the bathroom in the middle of the night because my rig didn't have any kind of toilet. Since getting a van, that's no longer an issue, but to all my ladies out there who are considering moving into a smaller vehicle and stealth camping, this is something to keep in mind. This is one area where all you guys out there have a major built-in advantage. Just keep a water bottle on hand and make sure you label it clearly. A couple other options I want to mention: renting land or someone's driveway. I haven't done this, but I could see it being a solid option for anyone who has an in-person job in a certain location, or even if you just want a little built-in stability. Airbnbs, hotels, house sits, staying at a friend's house. This probably accounts for 30% of my time on the road, though this is heavily skewed by the past 2 years and also 2020. My first 2 years on the road, I had very few breaks from sleeping in my vehicle. But if you're anything like me, you may find that with time, having balance between time on the road and downtime is really key to sustaining this lifestyle and your sanity long term. A lot of you have asked what house sitting platform I use. I use Trusted House Sitters, and no, this is not sponsored by them, but I am a huge fan. So, is it difficult to find overnight camping? Yes and no. I think, as with most things, it takes some time and practice to really figure out what works for you. I will say this is something that has gotten easier with time. It took me a couple weeks to really start feeling confident in my ability to find safe and comfortable places to sleep. Also, it was far easier to park overnight in my SUV than it is in the van because the SUV had more of the stealth factor and it was also 4x4. So I could just go to more remote camping spots that my van could potentially reach, but I don't always want to risk it. These days, I generally don't even start thinking about where I want to spend the night until like 7 or 8 p.m. because it's just become second nature to figure that out on the fly. There's always the possibility a cop might knock on your door in the middle of the night. This has happened to me twice, but not the way you might expect. Not the way I expected. One time, I was sleeping overnight at a mountain pass because I was going to hike the next morning. All of a sudden, I hear this knock on the door. I open it up. There's 2 police officers standing there, and they're like, "Ma'am, are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And they said, "Well, we received a phone call from someone saying there was screaming here in the area, and you're the only vehicle here." And I was like, "Oh, interesting. Well, it wasn't me." And he like peeks his head in and sees my ex. He backs up again and mouths to me, like, silently, "Are you okay?" And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And he was like, "Okay." But that freaked me out. Someone screamed up here. There's no other vehicles. Something's going on in the woods. Let's get out of here. The other time was in the middle of the day. A cop came up and rapped on my door here. And I opened it up and he was like, "Hey, do you sleep in here?" And I was like, "Oh," I didn't know what to say. And so I was just like, "Yeah." And he goes, "That's so cool. My girlfriend really wants to buy one of these, and I've not actually seen the interior of one." Not what I expected. But honestly, I haven't had any issues with that. Knock on wood. But I am very mindful about where I sleep, and I really don't take that many risks. There is one other time, though, that I did get a ticket. I slept on the 101 in Big Sur, the 101 highway, and the cop didn't even knock. He just left a ticket and walked away. So but that's really the only time that I've really encountered an issue with overnight parking. I will leave you with this final note. It's really important that we are respectful of the places we pass through and park for the night. Let me give you an example. One time I was staying in an Airbnb in Portland and a minivan pulled up right outside the house. They opened up all the doors, started unloading their belongings from the van, organizing and just cleaning everything, to include dumping 2 pee bottles onto the road, all directly within the view of the living room window where we were sitting. And look, sometimes you will find yourself in awkward moments out on the road. I know that I have. But whatever you do, don't be that person that dumps a pee bottle in front of someone's house. Okay? Like, just don't do it. That was way longer than I expected it to be. I really hope that you guys found some value in this. Let me know in the comments below, as well as any other tips you want to add that maybe you found helpful when it comes to overnight parking. And yeah, the end. I love you guys. I'll see you soon.